Hi folks, it's Laura from So Very Easy. I want to talk to you about a subject that quilters as a general rule don't like and a lot of sewers don't like. However, there is an advantage to what they don't like. It's called tearing the fabric or ripping the fabric. A lot of times you'll go to have the fabric cut and they put a snip and they rip it. We don't necessarily like that as a general rule because it's not leaving you a nice edge. In essence, what it is doing, it's actually stretching the fabric. So you have all these tight threads that are like this. Then when they're ripped, they rip apart. So you actually end up with this little fan thing going on the ripped edge. It's not a very pleasant thing. However, there is a reason that sometimes you will need to rip your fabric. Let's talk about why. This fabric came right off of the bolt. And even off the bolt, it was not matching up. No matter how I matched it, it was not matching up. So somewhere in the processing, it was not being matched up. But I need to find the straight of the grain on this. So I need to rip it. I don't have to rip it. I could actually spend time and actually take all of these little threads and just keep pulling them until I have one continuous thread. I normally don't have time for that. So, and if you can't actually see the threads, sometimes ripping is an advantage. We're going to rip. So just take a snip. You need to snip it right through the selvage edge, because the selvage is a very, very tight area and it does not want to rip. And then just rip it. And you see already how I had thought I had going to have a nice big piece. I did not. So then I do it again. I would rather take little snips and go along than do one big piece because I don't want any wasted. So then I'm going to do it again. There we go. Nope, see, I'm going to run out. So again, I have not got the straight edge of that fabric. And let's do it again. This one I know will work because I got pretty close to the last one. So I'm going to be okay with that. There we go. So there we go. Now, there will be one thread that will be able to come off all the way because that's what this was. So I throw this away. Yes, I know. You can actually see it's rippled because the threads have been torn. So they've stretched them out of place. You will need to trim that off. So I know that it seems like you've wasted your fabric here because you've torn it off. But now I know exactly where my straight of green is. And even here, you will see it's still not matching up. Here's an example that is going to be easy for you to see. This white fabric I wanted for a back, but there was the straight of grain was definitely not there no matter how I did it. You would be able to tell, and if you look close, you will actually be able to see. These are the edges, and they do not match. So if I was to try to match the selvages would match. But the center fold sort of had this little wonky thing going on it. And so no matter how I tried to shift the selvage, it would not match. That told me that the grain lines were off. So I had to rip the fabric or find the exact grain lines. So ripping the fabric gave it to me. So now I was able to press it, and I always press it before I recut it. So I'll press it nice and flat, give it a good starch, and then I will know exactly where my grain line is, or my thread line. You can rip your fabric the lengthwise or the widthwise of the fabric. One will rip easier than the other, but you can rip them. Now, I definitely recommend trimming that off, because like I said, it does stretch. How much do you trim off? You'll actually be able to see. You will see how when the threads have started to come apart like this, you're going to want to cut there and take it off. I know it seems like a waste and you really hate to do it. I don't blame you, but it can be a lifesaver in the long time. if you put what you think are the same threads together and sew them, and if they're not after they're washed, they will warp and you won't have that straight of grain. So sometimes there's a bonus to ripping it and then cutting it. If they're going to rip it in the store for you, always ask them to give you a little extra so that you can cut that area off. So if you want 20 inches, make sure, and you can tell how much they need to give you extra by that. And if they don't want to give it to you, then you ask them to cut it or buy the extra, because it's not worth it in the long run to have that measurement off. Now, a little secret that I want to give you. When I have large pieces of fabric that I've used for an additional back, and I want to and still have it because there's a lot of it, what I'll do is I'll put the measurements on the selvages, because I know I'm going to be cutting the selvages off. So right here on the selvages, I've actually written the size. So this is 30 by 103, very odd size, but at least now I know what it is, because when I fold it up, it's going to look like a nice piece of fabric. It looks like I have a lot here. However, it's a lot lengthwise, but I don't have a lot widthwise. So at a glance, without having to take apart that whole pile and measure it, I have the measurement on my selvage. It's a very convenient thing. And I do it to a lot of my fabric now. The other reason I'll rip it is if I'm going to make the sleeve for the back. I really like that sleeve to be straight because I'm sewing it right into the binding, and I want it to hang straight. And I am hand stitching the bottom of that part, so I do want it to sit straight. And by doing that, again, like I said, you will be able to see if the fabric is off. So my both edges have been ripped here, okay? So I know they're straight, but the selvage is definitely off. So I've just marked my straight line, and I know that's a straight line, so I'm going to be safe with that. But I, again, will trim off the sides so that it will not have that stretch in it. If you do not want to cut it off, if you want to leave it the way it is, just take that into consideration when you do your seam allowance. If you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which we usually do in quilting, on the back of your quilt, if you're going to join them together, and that's the edge you've ripped, put a larger seam. 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, but just put a bigger one, and then when you press it, you won't have that weaker fabric, because that's what, in essence, what you're doing. It's a weaker piece of the fabric now at the edge. And that's about the only reason that when I wouldn't trim it off is I'm going to do a bigger seam allowance. So that's kind of given me a little idea on why I rip my fabric, and if I rip my fabric, I'm not going to rip my fabric for everything. It's only for a particular time when I know the grain lines are not equal and I need to find the true grain lines. So hopefully that will help you a little bit.